sugar creates more sugar cravings.
Your body becomes a bit more androgenic.
Your body interprets all forms of stress the same way.
It can take a good few months to feel better.
It triggers something that we call the weight gain triangle. You end up with more testosterone, less estrogen. Welcome to today's Q&A, the first Q&A I've got with myself, Rob from Trinity, and Jane from Menopause Not Bad. Jane, do you want to say hey so you pop up?
Hey all, nice to see you. You know I do love a live.
So we're really excited today because we've got lots of questions to go through about all things menopause, HRT, staying fit and feeling, I suppose feeling your best is really what we're about. Is that right, Jane? What do you think?
100%. And I think a lot of my followers, certainly on Facebook, are probably going to think I've lost my mind talking to you because I'm always going on about HRT and hormones. But I often say to my followers, I don't want to talk about diets. I'm not talking about diets. I'll talk about nutrition. I'm not talking about diets. And now we're going to be talking about nutrition / diets / exercise. Now, exercise isn't my thing. Anybody who knows me will know I hate exercise, hence why I'm linked with you, Rob. And I want it to be clear that I'm not now selling exercise in an unhealthy way. I'm promoting exercise with Rob at Trinity purely because the phrase strong, not skinny is so important, and there's a reason why we talk about strong, not skinny. I'm not looking to be thin. None of us are looking to be thin. We're looking to be healthy as we age.
Definitely. And if people haven't seen me, because I know I might be new to your communities, Jane.
Yeah.
So here at Trinity, we've been helping women for the last decade, well, about 12 years now. We've helped over 7,000 women. But it's not just about, like, weight loss is kind of a byproduct of what we do. So lots of our clients do lose weight, fit back into all their favorite clothes, even if they are going through menopause. But it's about being strong. Like you said, Jane, it's feeling good. It's having more energy, reducing menopause symptoms, and ultimately just looking and feeling as good as you possibly can and aging really, really well. So it's much more than just what the number says on the scale, which as I said, is kind of incidental. So I know you've got some questions from your community, Jane, and we've got a few different things we want to talk about. Where do you want to kick things off with the questions?
So I did have one question which I thought was really relevant more to you, Rob, than me.
Yeah.
Michelle in my community had posted, she hadn't posted, she'd emailed me about this. So I won't give her second name because she hasn't given permission to share that. Mm-hmm. But she said, and this actually, Michelle, if you're watching this, is exactly the same as my situation. So she says she's 57, she's a year younger than me, the heaviest she's ever been. And she's really looking to get rid of that spare tire. She's tried everything. I don't know what everything is. She hasn't listed what everything is, but you probably know what everything is, Rob, because you've experienced the excuses we all come up with, me included. And she just wants some tips really on how she can start approaching getting rid of that spare tire that a lot of us get. And I can talk about the HRT elements of that later, but let's crack on with your expertise first.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to get both takes on it because it is partly hormonal, that change.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people are doing is trying everything they're trying is the things that used to work. This is what we hear a lot. So the things that used to work in their 20s and their 30s, whether it's just cutting back on things, whether it's cutting out carbs, whether it's going back to those same gym classes or running, maybe doing a slimming group. A lot of those things used to work quite well. And when your hormones are, I don't know what word you would use, Jane. I hate to use the word optimal, but when you are having a monthly cycle, okay, we'll go with optimal. When your hormones are optimal, pre-menopause, you can get away with a lot more. I was speaking to a lady literally yesterday, and she said, I used to come home from holiday, and within a week, I'd lost the holiday weight. Yeah. Now it sticks around for months and months and months. So that's
completely true. And I, from my own experience of not just working with women for the last 8 to 10 years, but also my own personal experience, even though I'm all HRT'd up, all fully balanced, all good, hence why you and I are probably a bit more entwined together with our businesses than I would normally have done. I've noticed the last couple of years, even though I was postmenopausal 2 years ago, by 2 years ago, and all hormonally balanced with my HRT, I had a hysterectomy just over 2 years ago, and that changed the way that my body does things. Obviously, the operation itself made a difference because your body has a lot to deal with, but it actually made a difference to the way that my body deals with fuel. And so, although it was never easy for me to keep my weight low, I've noticed those last 2 years, which is what I'd said to you before, Rob, these last 2 years, my weight has really crept up, and I haven't really done anything different. I probably had the odd too many wines, but I always did that anyway. So that was no change. And I found my weight. One thing that you said in a post actually a while ago, my weight was very similar to a client of yours, where she'd said, I can't remember the lady's name, but she'd said that she was knocking on the door of 13 stone and going, oh God, what am I going to do? Now, I have never been as heavy as I am now. I'm reasonably fit, but I'm doing something wrong. And even though I'm a nutritionist as well, I just find it so difficult to motivate myself to do the right things. Those changes, whatever those changes are, make such a difference, don't they? Because they knock your hormones, your stress levels, cortisol, all the things we know about.
Yeah, so let me try and shed some light on what those changes are, because I'm a big advocate for, if you understand what's happening, you then know a little bit better about what to do about it, because otherwise, like you said, for both you and was it Michelle, it can be very confusing.
Yeah. Because
you're not doing anything different and you're gaining weight, which is what we see. So key changes are estrogen is going to be lower. It can fluctuate through perimenopause, as you know, and then lower. But estrogen does a lot more than just impacts the kind of classic, I suppose, menopause symptoms like hot flushes, night sweats, joint aches and pains, anxiety, overwhelm. Those are all key symptoms, but it does a lot when it comes to your body composition as well. So what tends to happen is the balance of estrogen and testosterone shifts. And with a lot of hormones, as you know, it's more about the balance than the exact levels of them. So testosterone typically reduces as well with age, but for men and women, it just sort of gradually declines.
Yeah.
But estrogen is going to fluctuate and then go to a much lower level than it ever was before. So you end up with more testosterone, less estrogen. And that then leads to a more kind of male-like body pattern.
I was just going to say that. I often say to women, they say, why am I getting that spare tire? And I say, it's a bit like you'd expect a man to have a beer belly, for example. It's because, as you've rightly just identified, Rob, your body becomes a bit more androgenic. It starts to think it's a little bit more male. I know you're not turning into a man, so you don't need to panic, but it just starts to behave as it would if you were a man. And at the same time, women often find they have sort of a male pattern hair loss. So sort of this sort of area, which again is your body going, I'm low on estrogen. What am I supposed to do? Oh, this must be what you're expecting of me. And so it starts to fight for that balance. And sadly, then, hair loss is one of the things that happens. And that weight gain is another thing. It's kind of in panic mode, trying desperately to find some balance.
And it's not just the one other thing I say to people, because it can seem then like it's inevitable. This is like a rhetoric we always are trying to change, because what we tend to see is people feel like it's inevitable they're going to gain weight around menopause because everyone is saying it. And what we tend to see is then that subtly shifts people's actions because they feel like it's hopeless.
Yeah.
Because I'll get on to exactly the other changes that you can then work with. But because they feel like it's hopeless, they're then having the extra glass of wine or more at the weekend, because they're also potentially feeling more anxious, feeling more stressed. It's a whole load of things going on. They're struggling a bit more at work because of the brain fog. There's all these things going on. And then they tend to make slightly less good nutrition choices, maybe have a little bit more alcohol. Maybe their sleep's also disrupted. And all these little things add up so that their weight gain starts to happen. But it's not necessarily because your body is just going to gain weight automatically. It's not guaranteed, but we do need to work differently with it.
Yeah, definitely. And the alcohol thing is an interesting one. As you know, Rob, as part of my cleanse for my program I'm on with you, I've cut out alcohol, which is just so annoying. But I've done it for now because I do like my wine. But women often find, certainly perimenopausal women will often, and I did the same, we'll often find that, you know, the stress of life and the symptoms, that fuzzy, buzzy head that we can get, and just generally feeling rubbish and exhausted, get to the end of the day, crack open a bottle of wine, have a couple of glasses, and that wine can really help to numb those feelings. And I know it certainly did in my situation, where I'd have that first glass of wine, I'd go, oh God, the buzzing has stopped, thank God. And it just starts to make you feel a bit more normal, because that wine, that alcohol, it could be a G&T, it could be anything, has had a mild estrogenic effect on your body. Therefore, your body thinks, oh, I've got more estrogen, I'm starting to feel better. But obviously that's a false reading. And then, of course, 2 or 3 hours later, you feel rubbish again. And in the morning, you've got a hangover and you're dehydrated. And then you're into your world where you start eating rubbish because you're not feeling good. So you start eating the crisps and all the stuff that isn't good for you. And then you're more likely to put on the weight, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And we've actually just had a question pop in, so I can see from Claire. So this is related to the next thing I want to talk about. So we're still on Michelle's topic, but Claire said there's a lot of noise around cortisol, which there certainly is. How do we really reduce this with nutrition and exercise? So much snake oil and bad info out there. Great point, Claire. So I always see it as, from my perspective, because what you do, Jane, with recommending different things around HRT, that can really change your hormones quite dramatically. Oh, yeah. What we're trying to do is kind of look at what's already happening and how can we kind of minimize the extreme fluctuations. Because if you do have extreme cortisol, high cortisol, chronically elevated cortisol, which is high all the time,
yeah,
it triggers something that we call the weight gain triangle, which is 3 additional hormonal side effects. So leptin resistance, insulin resistance, and thyroid deregulation.
Yeah.
Put it really simply, leptin controls your satiety and hunger. It's also disrupted by lack of sleep. So from the alcohol that you were talking about there, has a massive impact on sleep around menopause. So you're going to be craving foods more. So this is maybe one of the reasons people are going to eat more, is because of cortisol, lack of sleep. They're then craving stuff more, and then they end up overeating, and then it gets stored around the middle because of that different hormonal balance. Insulin is a storage hormone. It helps you to remove glucose from the blood, but typically insulin resistance leads to more fat storage around the middle. So again, that's going to be more of that middle-aged spread that we don't want. And the last thing, thyroid, most people are aware, your thyroid impacts your metabolism. If that's slowed down, you're going to have a slow metabolism. It's going to be more likely to gain weight again, and harder to lose it. So this is a scenario it's quite hard to figure out exactly what's going on. We've had clients cortisol test, and the testing is not great because it depends how you are on the day. Yeah. But the general mindset we found that works best is to assume, for most of our clients, they're pretty stressed anyway. So we assume we need to be careful about cortisol. So they're like working in really busy jobs. They're in back-to-back meetings all day. You know, they're also, most women still, unfortunately, usually nowadays women are working and have the family responsibilities mostly on their plate.
Sure.
So they're juggling all these things. Stress is really high. And then...
Not in your world though, Rob. I noticed you taking the baby out in a little papoose thing the other day.
I do my best. So we have a 15-and-a-half-week-old baby, but I'll be completely honest, my wife still takes more of the responsibilities. She's still more like ordering the nappies and all the things. And then, she's got him now. So it's still, the balance is off.
Of course.
Yeah, just to finish that bit on cortisol. So what we try and do is not add any more cortisol to the system, because what most people are doing is they've already got all that stress. And I'm sure you have some more insights on cortisol, because I'm interested to hear from you, Jane, because I know you'll probably teach me some things to say about that too. But what we try and do is not add any more stress to the system from extreme exercise and extreme dieting, because your body interprets all forms of stress the same way. It adds to the allostatic stress, like the total stress. Like if you have a bucket, it's pouring more water into the bucket until it overflows. So we don't want to do, we avoid things like HIIT training. So that's very trendy. Great if you're in your 20s, maybe 30s. But if you're really stressed and tired, you really don't want to be doing or need to be doing it. So we avoid like that kind of extreme exercise, HIIT, spinning, even running. If you're not a natural runner, this can be very stressful on the body. People think, maybe I'll do a marathon to lose weight. That's probably not the best thing to do, especially if you've got achy joints. And then I'll just wrap this up, and then I know you've probably got a million things you want to say.
No, I haven't. It's fine.
And then I get very excited about this. And then exercise. Nutritionally, what we try to avoid is it's basically just starvation diet. So anything really extreme. So, like you said, we're not really talking about dieting. We try and talk about nutrition to feed the body. And what you really want to avoid around menopause is anything too extreme, because if it's too extreme, you won't stick to it. And if it's too extreme, you could spike cortisol too high, especially if it's with extreme exercise. So Claire, just to wrap that one up, and then let's see what Jane has to say on it. It's making sure we're not adding more to the cortisol that's already probably a bit high. If you're in that situation with a busy, stressful job and family life, and caring for aging parents is another huge one.
Yeah.
So we just try not to add any more. So we're kind of avoiding pushing it to beyond what your body can actually cope with, without then shutting down, holding on to fat, storing more fat, increasing cravings, and all those things.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything you said. And actually, I'm just going to complement that with a couple of HRT comments. But it was really interesting what you just said there, Rob, because I hurt my knee last year, so I haven't been running for a long time now. But I used to run. I'm not a fast runner. I'm like a plodder. But I used to run park run and regularly run when I could. And if I did a run of, if I did like a 5K or something or more, I would often find, because I'm not a natural long distance runner. I'm quite a good sprinter, but I'm not a good long distance runner. And I'd find that if I ran in the morning, I was asleep most of the afternoon, because my body's gone, oh, that's you done for the day, my dear. Thank you very much. You're out for the count. So I would have to plan in to have an afternoon. And also, by the way, going for a run, which I know my community will understand, I'd give myself permission then to have nice big cake, a nice big fatty breakfast. And so all of that on top of putting my body under pressure. And I'm not saying running is bad for you, but it was probably the wrong sort of running for me. And I probably won't be doing that again. I'll be doing longer walks or running on shorter distances. But from my perspective, it was too much for my body to take running and then eating the wrong foods, big old sugar crash afterwards, and just to sleep for 2 hours in front of the telly because I just hardly keep my eyes open. And I know other people who have similar reactions, and that as you age, your body becomes less able to deal with that. Again, running is great. I'm not slating running, but some people are made for long distances. Some people aren't. It's whatever your body needs. And I don't think I ever lost weight running, to be honest, Rob.
A lot of people end up eating the calories back and more, like you said.
100%. I would never eat a cake. Don't get me wrong, I love a cake, but it's not something I would go out and buy or I would choose to eat. I always, because I'm wheat intolerant, I tend to go for something a bit plainer anyway. But they have gluten-free cakes at our local cafe. And so it's there. You think, oh, well, I've just done 5K. I'm all good. I can have it. And then you sit around for a few hours drinking tea, chatting. And, you've gone from high exercise to blobbing and just taking in loads of calories, which is fine now and again. But when you're doing it every week and perhaps more than once a week, that's a lot. So all I was going to say was, really, everything you've said is completely true about cortisol. And I really bang the drum about consistency and getting our hormones balanced. And I know you mentioned consistency on something the other day, Rob, but I'm always going on about being consistent and giving your body the chance to adjust to changes and to adjust to what's going on, and trying to do things that are anti-inflammatory. And sleep is a massive one. And you will know that women who are perimenopausal and are not taking any HRT, but struggling, or menopausal, by the way, not just peri, but post as well, who struggle because they're getting up 3 or 4 times in the night for a wee, or they're really bloated. And sometimes that's at night, sometimes that's in the day. So they're uncomfortable and their sleep quality is poor then. And if you're bloated because you're low in estrogen, because your gut transition slows down when you're low in estrogen, that's quite a stress on your body, because you're constantly clenching and thinking, oh my God, I feel so awful. So all those little stresses raise your cortisol. And a lot of my clients and community will say, I wake up, as soon as I open my eyes, I'm just so anxious. And I completely understand that. And a lot of that is because of that lack of sleep that you mentioned. It's down to potentially a poor diet or a mismatched diet, perhaps on the good old phones at the end of the night, which my husband and I are dealing with at the moment, because we're both quite bad at that, because you're literally on full alert on your phone, and then you put your light out and you're supposed to go and have a restful sleep, which doesn't work. So this isn't meant to be a blame statement, but it's a fact. And I've done all of these things, so I completely get it. But if we can improve the lifestyle factors, that's massive. And from my world, if we can get that HRT, that hormone balance right, which isn't immediate, a bit like you and your world, Rob, it's not an immediate fix. Sometimes it takes lots of tweaking back and forth. And as we go through perimenopause towards postmenopause, that HRT regime is going to need changing. I must have been on about 15 different HRT regimes over the years. And finally, post-hysterectomy, I'm all settled on one. But a lot of women, and I was one of these women, will say, I've been on HRT 3 days and I still don't feel any better. Or I've been on HRT 2 or 3 months and now I feel bad again. Well, both of those things are really common. It can take a good few months to feel better. And also 3 months in, it's so common. I mean, I say 3 months just as a sort of, pin in the map, really. It could be 2 months, it could be 4 months, but it's really common for your body to go, well, that was nice. Yeah, that's all good. Now, can we refine it a bit? So you might need a little bit of an increase. And in some cases, you might need a bit of a decrease, where women will say, actually, I do feel a bit kind of jittery still on. And so I think maybe I need to reduce the estrogen. Fine, let's reduce the estrogen. You've not done yourself any harm having the slightly increased dose, but now we know where we are and we can adjust that. But there's no need to not take HRT for fear of it not working. You're never going to know how good you can feel until you try it. But we just start low and work up to it and hopefully balance you out sooner rather than later. I know I went off the cortisol conversation a bit there.
And I want to stay on that though. Like how often, because we now ask clients, like, when was your last HRT review? Because we have so many come to us who say, yeah, I'm on HRT. And it's like, when was it last reviewed? 2 years ago. And they're not feeling good. Like, how often is that like, how long is a piece of string? Is it different for everyone, or is there general guidelines of how often it should be reviewed? My understanding was like annually, but that often doesn't happen on the NHS. But what do you find?
Annual reviews, that's spot on. I think from a textbook perspective, they should have an annual review.
Yeah.
When you first start HRT, it's wise to have a review after those first 3 months, just to kind of see where you are and say to the doctor, yeah, I'm feeling good, not quite right. I will say, though, and this is not meant to be a doctor GP bashing comment, but at this point, most doctors don't know what to do when you go for your review. And that's improving. Things are changing. No slight on doctors. They've not had the training. They haven't had time to do anything about it. They haven't been given the resources. People are having to go to them with what they want rather than asking for help. But yes, you should have a review after 3 months. However, my general rule of thumb is to say, look, if you're feeling good, if your symptoms are all being managed and you haven't got any bleeding that you weren't expecting, or that's more than you were expecting, then actually you're okay, you're good. If it's managing your symptoms, it's doing the right thing. Yes, you could have a blood test to check your estradiol levels, but a bit like you mentioned earlier, it depends what time of day. And if somebody took that blood test an hour later, it would probably be completely different. I did have 2 clients a while back who were both very, very similar, not related to each other at all, very, very similar in their situations. Both had blood tests, came back to me, and it was pretty much the same advice for both of them from my side of things. And one had her blood test at a similar time of day to the other. and she'd been told her estradiol levels were normal, and the other person had been told her estradiol levels were abnormal, and she needed to see them again, and they were pretty similar, and it was just the interpretation of those blood results was completely different. And I know there'll be people watching this who'll say, what is a normal estradiol level? So there is no normal, it's different for everybody, but you really should be aiming for around about 250 PMOL in the UK. I can't remember what the conversion of that is to in the States, but you can Google the conversion on that, because that gives you, it's well researched that gives you the additional bone protection that we really crave to stop the osteoporosis risk increasing. However, many women need much higher levels, and some women are fine on lower levels. So I think I used to be fine on 300 and something, and now I'm better on 600 and something because things have changed for me. And I did have sorry, I'm rambling there, but I'm just going to tell you this one thing. I did have a bit of a disagreement with my doctor, who rang me and said, no surprise, obviously, who rang me and said, oh no, because I had blood tests. Oh no, your levels are too high. They're in the thousands. And I went, they're really not. And she said, no, they are. I went, yeah, that's not the right answer. I said, that is a tainted test. There's something wrong with that test. There's no way on this earth that my levels are in the, I think it's about 1800 or something. I said, no. So she said, oh, well, we need to take you off your HRT. And I laughed on the phone. I went, no, that's not happening. No. So I said, look, let's just take another test. I said, I'm happy to have another test. So I had another test, perfectly fine, came back at 300 or 400 or something. I went, there you go. The blood tests are not the be all and end all. I feel well. I know I'm well. I'm able to, do what I want to do. No symptoms. So that has to be the main benchmark for reviewing, which I know is a long answer to your very short question.
I think it's a great point, though. Like a lot of the time, doctors don't have much time. Like I try and empathize with them because they, especially in the UK, like the NHS is overworked. They have like 10 minutes or whatever it is to try and find a solution for someone with almost no background. This is why I think we both work with a lot of people one-to-one, because understanding a person takes time and understanding what's exactly going on. And most of the default answer we hear is probably the same with you. They have to just err on the side of caution of like, stop the HRT because we're not sure really what's going on, or stop exercise because you've got an injury, when actually you could easily work around it, and stopping it's going to make you way less healthy in the long run. You're going to lose muscle, you're going to lose bone, but they don't have time to go into the detail of creating a custom plan and supporting you through it. So they just say stop, which is actually really bad for long term.
And it's really bad. It's really bad from your perspective, from a fitness perspective, to be told that. And I remember being told when I had a prolapse and I went to a pelvic physio, NHS pelvic physio, and I was told while she was fumbling around up there as they do in that delicate way, she said, "Oh yes, you've got quite a severe prolapse," and this was years ago. And I said, "Oh, am I okay to run?" She said, "No, you can never run again." And I went, oh. And that, at the time, running was my main exercise. And so it put a complete stop to my exercise regime, which was really bad for me. I now know, of course, that was not the right advice. But, she was just giving advice that she thought was correct. She didn't mean me any harm. But also with HRT, when somebody is told, just go off your HRT because we don't know, that can be really harmful. So if somebody's really struggling, on a very serious note, if somebody's really struggling with their mental health because of their hormone deficiency of perimenopause, and suddenly that's taken away from them, their HRT is taken away, that can have a really drastic effect on their mental health and their physical health, depending on, what the issues are. I cannot imagine what would happen if I was not taking estrogen, which makes me sound like some sort of mad estrogen drug pusher. But honestly, I am one of those women that I cannot function. My brain just will not work without HRT. And I was never really, really, really low from a mental health perspective. But I do remember saying to my husband before I started HRT, and I remember saying something along the lines of, I don't feel as if I want to do myself harm, but I can understand why women do. And so it's really not kind to say to people, no, you can't exercise because, or you can't, or don't take your HRT because, unless there's a very, very good reason for that person not to be doing those things.
Imagine living in a home that you've cherished for years.
You've done your best to keep it in good condition,
But no matter how much you clean, paint, or repair,
the problems keep piling up.
the cracks are showing, the roof is leaking, and it feels like everything is getting worse despite your best efforts.
For many women, losing weight around menopause feels just like that,
You've tried diets, workouts, and advice,
where the results don't come and the frustration keeps growing.
That's where our Fit Over 40 private coaching program comes in.
Think of us as your expert renovation team.
We know exactly how to fix the root issues, rebuild your confidence, and create lasting results, just like restoring a home to its best condition.
If you're ready to finally see results that last, click the link in the description below now. Let us help you restore the body and the life you deserve. Again, the doctor has a very short period of time to kind of come up with a decision to try and just like, they have to err on the side of caution, like we said. But like you said, there can be really severe mental and physical downsides of that decision. It's not their fault. They don't have time to. But exercise and nutrition as well can be as effective or more effective for mental health management than SSRIs. So, classic antidepressants.
Yeah.
So telling someone to stop that is really bad for their long-term health a lot of the time. So I always just want to encourage people listening. There's always a way to work around almost any injury, unless you've been in like a huge car crash and you've broken 100 bones in your body. Like we've worked with clients who've been trampled by horses, and been in a wheelchair and then come out, and then we've worked with them. Clients have had hip replacements. Like they feel so good if they're able to work around that and still do something like with your running. And
mentally, that's really a real boost to be able to say, well, I'm doing the best I can for this moment in time. I mean, I give my husband as an example. He won't mind because, he doesn't mind being in the spotlight. As an example, he's a really good runner, but he hasn't been able to run for a long time now because he's injured his knee. So he's been doing other things and playing golf and all that. But it does make a real difference to him not exercising from a mental health perspective. And he substitutes that and he goes to the PT and he does other things. And that when he's done those things, I can always tell that he feels better mentally for that. Not that he struggles with his mental health, but he's definitely more smiley when he's done something towards making his body feel better, even though he can't do the thing he used to be able to do at the moment, which I think is really, really important. Just on that note, actually, slightly off that note, just about mental health and nutrition, which you've just mentioned, Rob. I had a client a long time ago, this was a good few years ago, who I saw in a video call, and she'd come to me for HRT advice because that's what I do. But I was watching her on the video call and she looked awful. She looked like she was so poorly. And I noticed throughout our conversation, I was trying to get information from her, obviously, as we do in that one-to-one situation, and pulling the pieces together just in terms of the hormone help. But I noticed she was sipping from like a protein shake sippy cup thing. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, protein shaker. Yeah.
Yeah, that thing with a straw coming out. And I said to her just before, I gave her some advice about the HRT, and then I just before we ended, and I said, "What is that you're drinking?" And she said, "Oh, it's a long story." I said, "I have time." I said, "What's the deal?" So she said, "Oh, well," and none of this had come up in the consultation, which is why I do love video calls, because you can actually see people. She said, "Oh, I haven't been able to eat a proper meal, proper food for about 5 years." And I went, "Okay, talk to me about that. Tell me more." And so she said, well, she'd had some sort of gut issue about 5 years before. And for one reason or another, very long story, but one reason or another, she'd then become frightened to eat food. So she was living on these protein type shake things. And she had zero energy, of course, because she wasn't eating the proper food for her body. Not her fault. She just got herself into a pickle. And I just said, you're so malnourished. I said, forget the HRT. And my message to anybody watching this is, although I spout on about the benefits of HRT, it's not always about the HRT. We have to start at the ground level, which is where, Rob comes in terms of the fitness and the nutrition as well. And we both deal with nutrition. There's no way HRT was going to make this woman feel better until she'd sorted her nutrition and got herself actually back to a decent, non-inflamed body, because she looked, I liken her look to somebody who, when somebody's is on steroid treatment or has had chemotherapy and they become quite bloated, the skin becomes quite grey and quite bloated. That's what she looked like. She just looked awful. So we had to start then. We just forgot all the HRT stuff, start with nutrition and then introduce that later. And took it from there, which just shows we are, we're more than just hormones or just fitness or.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's got to be a holistic approach, hasn't it? And
although I don't like the word holistic, it makes me sound a bit woo-woo.
Yeah, it's a bit. I remember I didn't used to know when we first started this business like 12 years ago. Someone said that word, and I was like, Google, what does holistic mean? I didn't know what it meant. But you've got to attack it from all the angles if you want to use different language, right?
No, it's a good word. It's just that it's never in my vocabulary purely because it feels not very practical. Of course it's practical, but it feels a bit too, woo-woo is the only way I can describe it. A bit too, yoga and, that sort of.
Well, that's the reason we're called Trinity is it is more targeted. So exercise, nutrition and mindset's what we work on. And then obviously the HRT piece, we have experts to help with. And I think those are the pieces of the puzzle that all have to be right. And you can't just starve yourself or do something really simplistic in any of those areas. You can't just say, I'm on HRT or not. Every area is more nuanced. And around menopause, this is a big change we see. It's kind of back to those first questions is like there's all these different things you've got to get right for the person. And it's not as simple as, should I exercise or not? It's what exercise you're doing, how much, how are you actually doing each of those workouts? How, every specific bit is important. Same with the HRT. It's like what the combination is. How is it being delivered? What quantity is it being delivered in? Is there any other hormones being delivered? And I think that's where social media really annoys me. And it annoys me even because of the content we have to make to get attention. It has to be very simplistic. You can't go into nuance, which is why I love having these longer conversations, because we can get into the details a bit more and say, there's actually a really good question on details. I want to make sure we do answer this next one. I'd be interested to know, because you obviously have a nutrition background. So this is from Margaret. She said, are chromium tablets the best way to reduce sugar cravings? Or should I just eat fruit and sweet potatoes when I'm craving cake, biscuits, or chocolate? I mean, I have a strong opinion on this. What would you say?
Well, I'm not an expert on supplements, but my approach generally, whatever supplement it is it's nutrition first, without a doubt. And I just don't like adding in a supplement when there's a better alternative, if that makes sense. And also, I don't really like adding it, let's say multivitamins. Multivitamins are all fine, but I don't like the sort of hit it with everything approach. I'd rather, you mentioned the word targeted. I use that quite a lot as well. I like a targeted approach. So people will say, well, what would you recommend for menopause? And I'm like, well, okay, it depends what you're looking for. How long have you got?
This is going to be a while.
So let's talk about what you want to achieve. So, omega-3, great. Magnesium, great. Standards, not just for menopause. But, if you have if somebody says, oh, that's fine, I don't need to take X because I have this multivitamin. Well, usually with a multivitamin, you've got too much of what you don't need and not enough of what you do need. And so I'm all for the targeting side of it. But if somebody's looking to achieve a specific goal, I don't think a supplement is the way forward for that. But you might disagree with me, Rob.
It depends on the goal. But for this specific question, there are so many other places, like you said, Jane, I would start before that. So I think if you've got sugar cravings, that isn't actually I don't want to say normal, but it is normal because I hear about it all the time. But you shouldn't be in that state where you're constantly fighting cravings. And usually,
it's not your natural bodily state to have a sugar craving, is it? And we all have them. I have them all the time, and I'm hating the fact that I can't just eat a bar of chocolate. But there's a reason, isn't there, Rob, for that craving?
I would say the craving is the symptom, not the root cause. So if you're just trying to take a supplement to deal with the symptom, it's like I'm bleeding, so I'm just going to put plaster on, but I keep bleeding, rather than like, why do I keep cutting myself? We need to come back to that. Why have I got a cut in the first place? Or why have I got sugar cravings in the first place? And with all these things, there's lots of reasons that could be happening. A few very simple ones we always work with clients on. So first of all, sugar creates more sugar cravings. So a lot of the time, the more you eat, the more you want, because you get a blood sugar spike and a blood sugar crash. Yeah. So you're doing our program at the moment, Jane. At the beginning, we do something called the diet makeover. Well, we cut out sugar for 2 weeks because that's how long it takes for your cravings and gut to reset. So that's one thing that could cause sugar cravings, is sugar. But a lot of the time, that comes from lack of sleep, because lack of sleep will cause sugar cravings. So there's loads of different things. And then also just generally an unbalanced diet in terms of the makeup of that diet. So you're talking that Margaret talked about here, should I eat fruit and sweet potatoes? Those are all carbohydrates as well that, have got sugar in, even if they're naturally occurring. So we would usually go, we need to kind of come back to square one. I always say it's like resetting your computer. When hopefully most of your audience and I will just about remember when we had those beige computers, on the desk that were really big and clunky, and they would get.
I don't remember that. You're too young for that.
I used to sneak into my dad's office every weekend and play games on his grey beige computer, but it would eventually slow down and stop working, and you'd have to turn it off and on again, and because they don't tend to do it as much now. But it would start like going like, and then the blue screen of death would come up. Yeah, this is where most people's bodies are. And we've got to reset. So we take out the sugar, and then we also want to have more protein and less of these carbs. So most people around menopause don't deal with carbs so well, especially if you're carrying a bit of extra weight. So we have to, you have to cut them out entirely. So this is then where people swing to, is like, right, let's get rid of all the carbs. It's like, no, wait.
It becomes quite stressful. And I think it's good to do things gradually.
Yeah. I should say that we don't do all this at once.
No, you don't. And to be honest, even though I'm doing the sort of a whole elimination thing just for a couple of weeks, I haven't really found it that difficult at all. I've just had a little bit of a chat with my coach, and I said to her, I think there's a bit of sugar in the protein bars, or there's quite a bit of sugar in the protein bars I'm having. And she said, yeah, as long as it's less than 10 grams. And I said, yeah, I'm really avoiding them when I can, but I'm not beating myself up if I do have to have one, because as she said, as Laura, one of your coaches, said to me, I'd rather you ate something than ate nothing to avoid the sugar. And I think that's really, really good advice, because otherwise your body's then going to stress, isn't it, about not eating. And then you start really craving anything.
Well, over restriction can also be a massive, I think one of the questions you had, or one of the topics for today, was kind of consistency. And my first point was, again, we always look for what the root cause is. Is someone not consistent because they're working too much, they're too tired, but it can also just be they're unable to be consistent because they're just restricting themselves so much that it's miserable. And then all you want, it's like, there's a red button, don't press the red button. And immediately you're like, I want to press the button. So we never ban anything. We do a short reset, but...
Yeah, but I've not felt restricted even for that. And also because you say it's a short reset, I'm going, okay, 2 weeks, I can do this. And then after that, actually, what I really I am enjoying is the fact that I'm not very good at tracking. I was just saying to my coach, not very good at tracking. Literally, it's just another admin task for me. Now, some people are really data driven and will love that. So my coach is now, this makes me sound like a 2-year-old. She's doing visual prompts for me. So I'm going down here, a palm full of protein. I'm like, I like that. When I've seen that on the download anyway, but I like that because in my head, the other day I was cooking tea, and in my head I thought, I need protein. I thought, right, palmful. So I was looking for something that was a palmful size. And that's much better for somebody like me. And a lot of my clients are very neurodivergent like me. It's better for somebody like me because I've got such a visual brain. If you ask me to weigh something and track it, not a chance, whereas that suits some people brilliantly. Whereas, the visual side, in fact, I've got some pictures that I'm going to stick on my wall of
stick on the fridge.
Yeah.
But the palm, that's a good point. Palm of protein, a cupped hand of carbohydrates. So usually what we see is people are having, there's a couple of other rules you can use as well, but they're usually having like half the plate or more is carbs. And they often don't realize, because I think carbs have got this really bad rep, and it's not about never having them, but people say carbs and they really mean like chocolate or, the naughty stuff. But fruit is also carbs. Vegetables are carbs, but, slightly different form. So it's understanding, first of all, nutrition on a deeper level, which we spend some time doing. And I'm sure you do as well with people, because most people have just done dieting their whole life, right? And they only know extreme.
Well, particularly women of my era. So I'm 58 now. So I grew up in the 70s, and I kid you not, my mum was on a diet forever. I mean, she tried every diet possible. But these weren't diets, and anybody my sort of age will know this. In the old days, those were not diets to feed your body. These were diets to really make you feel hungry. My mum would just go without food. And even, she's no longer alive now, but even in her latter years, I used to call round to her house. And it was so ingrained in her. She was not overweight. She was much smaller than me. So she was probably at that point, she was 5'6". She was probably about 8.5 stone. So she was not overweight, but she always thought she was. And I'd say, should we have lunch or whatever? And she'd say, yeah, I'll do some lunch. So she'd make me some lunch. And then her lunch would be a crisp bread, so like a cracker or something, with a bit of peanut butter on it or something. So that was it, like one, maybe two, and a cup of coffee and a fag.
Almost like the French diet, isn't it? Like coffee.
Well, it is, because she smoked a lot as well, so that probably kept her weight down. But I used to say to her, don't you want anything else? And she'd never eat puddings or sweets or anything. And I'm not suggesting that you should be eating puddings and sweets, but she was always restricting herself. It was kind of ingrained in my head. So I grew up thinking that's how you make yourself fit. And even just the mindset around it. I remember her saying to me, I think after I'd had my first child, so obviously I was a bit overweight after I'd had her. And my mum said, in a kind way, but obviously it wasn't a great thing to say, she said, how are you getting on with, losing your baby weight? And you want to be careful because you won't like it if you're fat. And I just went, well, it's only a few weeks since I had her, give me a break. And I wasn't really that big. And she would not in a mean way, but she would have a little bit of a go if I was looking a bit, overweight at any stage in my life. And that sits in your mind. And a lot of women my age and my era will have had that same upbringing, where they're taught that thin is the way forward. Now, you can be thin and healthy, as you know. If that's the way you're built, great. And you can be larger and healthy, but you just need to get that balance right. And years ago, I was a body positivity coach, and I used to try to get this point across that this isn't about you being thin. It's about you being healthy, and whatever healthy looks like for you.
Yeah, so many great points. And I think we hear from our clients of that generation as well, so many mixed messages. So a lot of the time they had, or they were given so many mixed messages, I should say.
Yes.
So they had parents who would say, like, one hand, constantly commenting on their weight, maybe, as you said, trying to be from a good place, but also quite damaging in that. And it can lead to lifelong, we spend a lot of time often unpicking the mental side of perfectionism and judging themselves and being so hard on themselves and wanting to give up after a week. If they were on their own, they would have done, because they've ruined it all because they did one thing wrong or ate a bit too much. I love food. I'm all for people enjoying food and trying to do it in a healthy way. But then they were also told, children are starving in Africa, you've got to clear your plate.
I know. It was so difficult. It really was so difficult. I remember even my dad saying exactly that, clear your plate. And I was having to eat food I didn't even want or like, because I don't have a big appetite. I'm very much a grazer rather than big meals. So I have to be careful of what I'm grazing, of course. And then on the other hand, I was told to clear my plate. On the other hand, I was saying, don't be greedy. I was told, don't be greedy. And it's like,
so confusing. Where are you supposed to start?
Can I just change the subject? Because I'd forgotten there are a couple of queries that have come up in a group that I'm a part of.
Yeah, go for it.
It's very HRT oriented, but you may have an opinion from a fitness perspective as well. And there's just one I've got in front of me. There are loads, but just by the way, while I remember, because I have a very busy brain, I'm not going to be able to, and I know Rob's not going to be able to cover all the questions that you have in your head if you're watching this. You can obviously follow us on Trinity Transformations. You can follow me on Menopause or Not Mad, Instagram and Facebook. We both have websites. You can find us on there. And so just follow what we're doing, and you can ask your question in those threads as well. And we'll be doing these again, I'm sure, unless Rob's had enough of me bleating on.
Yeah, we've got so much more to cover. We're going to have to do.
So much more to do.
We're going to have to go through these more.
I know. So actually, strangely enough, this lady is also called Michelle, like the other lady, not the same lady. And she said she had I haven't read this in total, so bear with me. She had a total hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, which is everything out. That's her ovaries and her tubes and her uterus. And she says supplements to support hormones without HRT. So she wants to know about non-HRT options. What vitamins and minerals are necessary to handle the osteoporosis, osteopenia type of thing, and other things like calcium and boron. And then, so I'm happy to approach that. And then she says belly and hip weight gain. She's also, like I was, combating prolapse and UTIs. I can talk about that. It's quite a long one, this, but and what other things should be aware of. I'll let you talk first because I could go on for hours with that one. So, Michelle, if you're watching this either on live or record, I'm going to try and cover as much as I can on mine, and over to Rob for belly and hip weight gain.
I also want to touch on very, very brief. I'll go on this, but osteoporosis, osteopenia. You also want to be lifting heavy. You've got prolapse, so maybe you have to do this tactically, lifting weights or doing some sort of impact. Impact's not always good for the joints because, inflammation around menopause, you can have sore joints. So it looks like the research is now showing strength training is really effective for it basically pulls on the tendons, which pulls on your bones and then tells your bones to kind of regenerate and not waste away. So really important you're doing some sort of exercise around that. Yeah. If you've got prolapse and you can't do it for some reason, you can always sit and do exercise. There's lots of different ways to do it. But I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, of course.
And then everything else we talked about today kind of covers that weight gain challenge. I think I would definitely look at what you can do to manage the hormone levels. But it's just getting the nutrition fundamentals right. Because as I said, most of the people who come to us, they only know dieting. And actually, it's much more now about getting enough protein, enough fiber, enough of these things so you feel full. And then the weight will come off automatically. Yeah. So a lot of the time, it's just getting the basics right and not doing extreme dieting. That's probably what I would suggest because your body can't tolerate it anymore.
I think that's really good advice. And for somebody like me who's a snacker, knowing, even though I'm a nutritionist, honestly, sometimes when it's yourself, you just can't think straight. I mean, I'm terrible at telling myself what to do. And quite often my husband will go, what would you tell your clients to do? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, fine. I'll do the right thing then. But it's nice to know what you can snack on, that you don't have to not snack, but let's snack on something that's actually going to benefit your body. And that's not a glass of wine and a bag of Doritos.
And also the other thing we see a lot is those people are not eating meals that are balanced the right way. So then they're hungry an hour after. That's a sign you're probably, so it's everything. You want to have meals that fill you up. If you're not full from your meals, revisit those. You want protein in every one, a palm size. So morning, breakfast, and usually people don't get it, lunch and dinner. You need more protein if your estrogen levels are lower. So just generally with age, you need quite a lot more than a 20-year-old. So that's, again, I know I keep saying protein, but it's so key.
No, but it's true. And in fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, a female friend of mine, same, bit younger than me, but similar sort of stage of life. And she said, oh, I've been told that you have to have, loads of protein throughout the day and 30 grams of protein. And I just went, yeah. She said, oh, I was hoping you'd say that wasn't true. And I went, no, that's right. I said, I don't do it every day because I sometimes just can't for whatever reason. But I said, yeah, that's right. She went, oh, protein's really important then. And when it really is. And when we get it right, you do feel fuller for longer, and it does work, but you have to do it in order for it to work. We can't just think about the protein. And I know that sounds obvious, but quite often I'll plan everything out because I'm good at planning, and then I won't do it and then wonder why it hasn't worked. Let's have a think about that.
Well, I think a lot, like you now working with a coach, a lot of people need a little push from someone else. So we find that. And a lot of people also don't understand because they've never eaten like this, because they could have got away with it before menopause. You don't have to eat as much protein. So they've grown up being told they need to starve themselves. They're like, I'll have 1 egg or 2 eggs. It's like, no, you need 3 or 4 eggs. And it's initially it does feel a bit weird, but you can do it. And
it does feel weird. And also for people like me, we are not fans generally of feeling full. I know that sounds
weird,
silly.
Isn't it? I don't know why that
feeling
is.
But feeling full to somebody like me and my sort of upbringing, my sort of era, means we've overeaten.
So you might even judge yourself as like greedy, or your mum's voice in your head.
Exactly. And I can talk back to that voice in my head now because I know the science behind it. But most of us can't. Most of us go, oh God, oh look, I'm so greedy. I feel so full, and also people will think will mix up the difference between feeling full and feeling bloated. They are quite different things.
Definitely, and making the right choices. You shouldn't be bloated, and it should come down.
Yeah, of course. Just quickly.
Make sure you answer the other side of this question.
Well, yeah, there's loads. No, there's loads there, but I'll just quickly talk a bit about it. I've covered it a little bit with the whole hysterectomy. Can change the way your body does things and deals with your fuel. Obviously, I'm a fan of HRT, Michelle, so I am going to be telling you, I'm not going to be forcing you, but I'm going to be telling you that if you've had a full hysterectomy, you would be better to consider adding in some estrogen now, because that gives you huge protection and decreases your risk of things like osteoporosis and all other nasties. So consider that, because estrogen is not the devil and estrogen is not going to kill you. It's anti-inflammatory and very, very protective. And particularly if you take it in a transdermal format, so via a gel or a patch or spray. So I'm just going to put that out there. Vitamins and minerals necessary to handle osteoporosis and osteopenia. It kind of depends where you are in that journey, but I would always recommend, obviously nutrition, we know that's important. But really look at adding in your calcium, your vitamin D, your omega-3, those are kind of standard. Magnesium's really good as well. Add those in as standard with your HRT. Sorry, I said it again, can't help myself. Combating prolapse and UTIs. If you've got UTIs, you definitely need vaginal estrogen. You can get that in a cream format or a little pessary, really tiny little pessary format. It's really, really important, and I'm quite serious about this. It's really important to get those UTI outbreaks under wraps, because if we don't get them under control, as you age, when you become much, much older, they can have a really detrimental effect on your overall health. And there are too many deaths in care homes of women who have ended up with much, much worse things wrong with them because of mismanaged UTIs. And you don't have to have these recurrent UTIs if you get yourself all estrogened up. There is zero risk of vaginal estrogen. So if you're getting those recurrent UTIs, that's what you need to ask your doctor for. And that will also help with any prolapse challenges, because it helps to strengthen that area and helps to strengthen the skin in that area. That's my summary. There's more I could say, but I could go on for hours.
And I think that's a good place. It's 1:00 now, so this is where we are going to have to end it today. But we have had loads. There's more questions on our Facebook. I'm sure you've got more too. I think. Am I right, Jane, in saying you're going to do a HRT specific Q&A next week in your group?
Yeah, on the Menopause or Not Mad page, actually,
page.
so the public page, I'm going to do it next Wednesday. There's an event on the Menopause or Not Mad page. You can register your interest. Free Q&A on HRT and menopause. And then I think, Rob, we're going to do some stuff. We've got a lot of talking to do, so we're going to do some more stuff.
Yeah, we're hoping to do these more regularly. So if you still didn't get your question answered, I apologize for today. There's a couple more, I know. But now you know we're doing these, and you can get your questions in advance, and we'll do them first. So if you are looking out for it, please do that. And then
also the recording, Rob.
Yes.
Before I forget, I've asked a lot of people to comment inches underneath my post. If they want to do that to either you or me, then we can make sure they have the recording of this session if they would like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll share that out with everyone. We're going to be doing more of these. I just want to say, I'm sure the same for you, Jane. Thank you so much, though, for the great questions, everyone. It's been really enjoyable. And I hope some of our answers were insightful. And any more questions, save them for the next one. Should be in about a month's time. We'll come up with a more regular time and date.
Yeah, we will.
Anything else you want to add, Jane, before we wrap this up?
I don't think so, other than with HRT, never, ever be scared of HRT. Never be scared of fitness, but also never be scared of HRT. I am not perfect when it comes to health. But I know what you need to do. We just need to motivate ourselves and get that mindset right. So it ultimately all boils down to mindset.
Definitely. Well said. We'll leave it on that note. So thank you everyone for watching today. Thank you, Jane. And we will be back in a month's time or so to wrap it all up.
Perfect. Thanks.
If you're fed up with trying everything and seeing no results,
watching your weight creeping up and struggling to fit into your clothes,
and you're looking for the fastest and easiest way to get your ideal weight
and never have to worry about your weight or health again,
you can save yourself years of trial and error by letting us take care of the hard work for you in our Fit Over 40 private coaching program.
Over the past decade, our world-class team have personally guided more than 7,000 women to take back control of their health and confidence, and more importantly, maintain those results for life.
If you're ready to finally get results at last and find out how we can help you do that too, click the link in the description below to get the full details now.